Recent episodes, you criticized my inability to have a red shirt.
Yes, I did,
So you brought me a red shirt, which only leads me down a path of thank God we're not watching a Star Trek film. I'd be super concerned. But I'm still a little concerned because I'm wearing red, and that tends to bring the sharks out.
I mean, it's important when we talk about Dracula because look at the book.
Yeah, I mean,
even the
so
book, they know what's up. You have to
join us for Bram Stoker's Dracula today on Kyle and Nick on Books. Wait, we're not doing the book. Join us for Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, today on Kyle and Nick on Books on Film. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for finding us. And for Aloha fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. I always continue to forget, we are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Please check out that website, as other critics have their reviews on that as well. Today, we're going to talk about, because it's from 1992, and it's about 30 years old, Dracula.
Yes,
well, Bram Stoker, you have to say Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah,
that we're talking,
there's
so you don't get confused.
Copyrights and the lawyers get upset. Yeah, the title is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes, so when Jonathan Harker visits the castle of the reclusive Count Dracula, he discovers his client is a centuries-old vampire. Dracula imprisons Harker in the castle and then travels to England to seduce Jonathan's betrothed, a woman named Mina Murray, who bears a striking resemblance to Dracula's lost love.
So, we talked about Godfather a couple episodes previous, and that was from 72, so 20 years after he did The Godfather. Coppola, again, has to do juxtaposition between a wedding and a massacre, which is in this movie, as Jonathan and Mina get married, but Dracula's really upset about it. He's just going to go to a bloodbath. But, Coppola had to do the juxtaposition of a wedding and a murder.
To be fair, if you were directing TV at this point, I know a certain Game of Thrones episode that would have been perfect for him to helm. You're right, that's a good point. And this is also 2 years after the conclusion of the Godfather trilogy. He's left that portion of his life behind him.
After 3, yeah.
And actually, Godfather 3 and some of the happenstance on that film led to this movie actually being made. So let me explain this here. Winona Ryder was initially cast to play Corleone's daughter in the film, but due to the amount of work she'd put in recently, she was dealing with some mental health issues with the whole thing, the stress level of the job. She bowed out of that film, which led to a late shooting date, a lot of rush production for Godfather 3, and also casting Coppola's daughter, who was much maligned for her performance in the film. Yeah. So in order to bury the hatchet, they wanted to make sure that they were still kind of good with each other after that point. They met to talk about an adaptation of Jack Kerouac's On the Road, which ended up not happening because she mentioned having read the screenplay from James V. Hart for Bram Stoker's Dracula in passing, and mentioned it to him, and it got his mind working, his mind rolling, and eventually led to this film being made. So we would not have this movie if not for The Godfather Part 3, so show some respect.
And Winona Ryder being exhausted.
Yeah, which I can understand,
Right. So, and I like Coppola, when he gets really invested in something, he goes way over the top. Even though Godfather, he had a scrapbook that was like a tome. Well, I think
Apocalypse Now, he went psychotic.
Yes, there's a Heart of Darkness. There's a great documentary about this. But here, he not only does adapted the book, but he also makes it a personal movie. Because in the book, there is no love story in the book.
Yeah.
But he also incorporates a lot of Transylvania superstitions. He also used Greek mythologies of using Gorgons as the brides for Dracula. They're Gorgons, which is a Greek mythology, is the closest you can get through Greek vampires. They're undead. They usually have fangs, and they have blood running down their face, and they have snakes for heads. And Medusa is a famous Gorgon. So that's close you can get for Greek being a vampire, but he incorporates that as well.
Well, and he goes historical. He wants to dive into the man that was.
Yeah.
He also, actually, there's a lot of very subtle hints and like memories of previous adaptations of Dracula. You can see a slight love for Hammer for the original Universal film, even for the 1975 film.
There's even references to the old film Faust, which is Murnau, who did Nosferatu. He doesn't really cite Nosferatu as much as he does Faust, because it's the overhead of the eyes in the sky watching over you, or the head looking down on you. Yes.
But I love that he went at this film saying, I'm not going to put anything on film that couldn't have been accomplished back in the time that the book was made. Like everything is going to be done without CG if I can avoid it. And so that's why there's a lot of moments in this movie that you think are done out of it that are done on set and in camera.
I think it's 100% on set.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't get a confirmation that there was absolutely nothing, but I couldn't find anything that said that there wasn't something done on set. So there's even that moment you see when the train is riding along and then like the book is being read, the diary is out.
Yeah.
They built a giant frickin' book so that they could have the little train model moving across the top of it.
It does look like a little train model, but it's so effective.
They projected Gary Oldman's eyes over certain moments so he would look like he was looking in on them. They would do some creative editing techniques to kind of overlay
the old-fashioned
images.
the overlay 2 films and cut out the bottom, so it's a overlay, superimposing.
Yeah, so much of this film, like to my knowledge, everything, I couldn't confirm it, but like I believe everything is done on set and in camera in this movie.
Watching it again, I'm amazed how close proximity everything is. It's very claustrophobic.
Yep.
I thought there was a little more space. It really is not.
But there's all clever techniques about that too. There's that
like
scene
a
where
forced perspective
there's the
kind of thing.
shaving scene that was done, and I watched a little like footage on that. They actually built the set where the shaving is being done as a set that could move inward. So as the scene is going on, the room is actually getting smaller as the scene is going on. There are things like, we talked about the book, we talked about the eyes, like ways in which the film was manipulated all in camera to make it as claustrophobic, as frightening as possible, and working with it. And what I think is pretty cool is that, he does dive into these movies all himself. He embraced his costume designer, his set decorator, his people, and he said, what's most important is not getting it so much period accurate in terms of this, but finding costumes that scare you, things that disturb you from your past.
Yeah.
And that's where we get a lot of the beautiful costume design that
I think it's all right, yeah. I think this gets a lot more love than it did when it came out because people were... I think people weren't ready because you say Dracula, they're so used to, the old-fashioned 30s of an aristocrat wearing a tuxedo coming out, and he's very reserved, but he's going to dress as a bat. But this embraces the whole ensemble of a horrific thing.
This is the tragedy itself. You're right. I think this is the case where people are more familiar with the Universal film when this came out than they were that it was even based on a book.
Yeah.
So when you're making an actual adaptation of the book instead of just a remake of the movie,
where nobody's really read it, but think they know Dracula, but you don't really read the book.
Yeah.
And you think that he climbs the walls, he kidnaps kids.
He does turn into rats at one point, and that scene, I still don't know how that one was done, where he actually turned into rats. I don't know how that was done on camera.
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of like how the hell did you do
I have no idea. It looks so damn good, and I cannot figure it out. I've tried, but
it's almost like you don't want to because if you figure out the trick, you're like,
there's still some magic in the movie, I think. Yeah.
And in the whole bat suit, I think that was Gary Oldman wanted
he didn't want to wear the suit. He was upset because he thought it hindered his performance. So what they did was before they did another take of the scene, they had him walk up to each of the people in the scene he was with. Coppola said, "Do this." He goes, walk up to each of them and whisper something in their ear that will cause them to be terrified of you. And it doesn't sound like anyone's actually admitted what he said, but some of the stuff he said was so terrifying that was real fear on their faces with what he told them.
It worked.
And the same thing when he was doing his seduction scenes with not Mina, but
Winona.
not Winona.
Lucy?
Ryder. Lucy, yes. Okay. When he's with Lucy and he's seducing her, they said, "I want you to whisper things into her ear that are going to be seduction based." And that actress never said what it was, but she said it was very unrepeatable. The things he said that he wanted to do to her.
That'd be great.
And it's like, again, like Coppola allowed them to be moments when they could embrace what they're supposed to be in the film. He was allowed then to whisper into their ears.
Yeah, because we have to go back. Gary Oldman was not so much a headliner name at the time.
And I thought he was.
No, this is 92. He wasn't really carrying movies.
Yeah.
I mean, the big seller was Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, that's why Reeves was cast in the film, because they actually picked Reeves over Johnny Depp, which was what Coppola had kind of been interested in.
You
can't, they thought Johnny Depp wouldn't be able to carry.
And
the
plus,
movie.
they had a history together. Winona and Johnny Depp did.
Yep.
But who had a great year in 1992? Well, that's Anthony Hopkins playing doctors in 2 different roles with both a horror movie.
That's fair. Yeah, he did.
I didn't realize until I watched it. It's like, oh my god, this Anthony.
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs, I believe, was 91, but he won the Oscar in 92.
That's
so I'm
right.
sure he won the Oscar prepping.
And
for
immediately
this
after
movie.
this, he goes back to playing a doctor again, but being different, being the protagonist. And if you go back to the beginning of the movie where he's Vlad the Impaler doing the massacring, that is Anthony Hopkins being the priest.
Yep.
And that is later played upon it. So it's almost like you're playing on reincarnations.
Yeah, it's echoes, of time that we're playing with, where these three beings were always meant to interact.
Yeah, it's almost like the unholy trinity of these people. Because he's like, I've been searching for you for years.
Yeah, I love the line that
Van Helsing says. Yeah,
Oldman said that he picked the whole film, like he wasn't that interested in playing Dracula, but he picked it because he saw the line in the script, "I've crossed oceans of time to find you."
Well, he loves to say it because he took his long time to say it.
That is a quivering line.
I've crossed oceans of time. Yeah, so it's also a celebration of, like we said, New Hollywood. It was a celebration of old movies, and here Coppola is really putting an all-out of celebrations of old movies. You talked about the beginning of Dracula being in London, which is you set like old-fashioned camera, which is you just take a couple frames out and not do 35 frames, and maybe do like 28, 29, so it looks very jotty.
Yep.
And you
Things
black
move
and
a
white,
little bit unusually.
off hinge. But then you talk about Dracula wants to go see the cinema. You talk about, where is the cinematronic? I want to see this thing. And she has a disdain for it. If you want culture, go to a museum.
Yeah.
It's also how cinema was treated at the beginning. It's very trashy. It wasn't considered an art form. It was very low class, lowbrow entertainment. Which was, a lot of it was dirty movies too.
Yep.
Because a lot of it was, go in the corner and see a train. Or see the woman naked and stuff like that. So he does a celebration to begin the origins of movies. And in 1896, I think in talking about film theory, was the arrival of the train, which is showed in the movie. And we saw that in film history class as well. So it's 1996, and this is supposed to be 1896. And then this is supposed to take place in 1897.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's captivating because it takes Dracula and plays him more seriously than he's ever been played before. Because say what you like, the Universal films were serious, but they lacked a lot of what made the character in the books so captivating. He was kind of just a vampire for the sake of being a vampire, which it works very well for that film.
yeah.
But the Hammer stuff was very bloody for the sake of being bloody. The 79 film was like a sexual
very
thing.
Gaudy.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas this is a movie
lust.
that takes the fear and makes it work, takes the blood and makes it work. Coppola infused a lot of his performers and a lot of his crew members and said he wanted the film to feel at times like an erotic dream. And I think there's nothing more fitting than that than Keanu Reeves in a bed with three of his brides, You
have camera with the red gels everywhere project the light, and it's very like alarming, almost like they did in Dreamscape, where it's like a dream where it's like in the train.
That's true.
Very much red, encompassing red light.
And I want to point out as well, Keanu Reeves gets it on with Dracula's brides, and later would end up sharing a scene with one of those brides, Monica Bellucci in The Matrix Reloaded, when she just wants a kiss, and I'm like, Monica, you've had so much more.
That's a good catch. I didn't think about that. They were reunited.
She's already gotten plenty of Keanu Reeves. Why does she want a kiss? It's a nice repairing of those.
So it's very close. I like the choices of how you pace the film, because it's very claustrophobic, but it's intense how you segue. Like there's a scene of just simply a harp playing, and then, okay, now we're going to the play. Now we're going to have a dance or a party. Whereas you just have a cut of it simple like that. So there's a lot of zoom in focus, just inanimate objects.
Yep.
But you also have like something that looks a little bit silly, like you get Dracula's head on a pile of dirt.
Yep.
Which is just cut from nowhere. Or it happens many times. But yeah, he does very intricate choices of camera work to just pull you away and get invested a little, like bugs. Stuff like that. So it's almost an investigation, a little bit closer. Yeah,
he really cared about the source material and having a direct translation of it. And this is not the most correct translation of the book. There's a really interesting video you can find on Cinemassacre's YouTube page where they go through 12 of the most popular adaptations, and they actually break down the book and see which one's closer to it. And this one gets close. But it's not Dracula. As close as some of the other film adaptations, but there is a translation of the feeling and tone, I think, better than most other adaptations. Especially when you get into the tragedy of it all, the eroticism of it all, the kind of and kind of the kookiness of it all.
It is kind of a little kooky, but Lucy and they're sleepwalking, but Lucy is the lesser of the two women. Mina's kind of...
she's the more sexual one. She's the more focused on the physicality.
Yeah, of course she's gonna have red hair. Put out there.
But I also appreciate that all three of our suitors, Carrie Elwes, Richard Grant, and Billy Campbell, are Rocketeers in the film. All three of our suitors, when they all show up, I was convinced that all three of them, and every time they show up in this movie, I'm like, you shouldn't have three of them because they're going to be stumbling over each other. But each one has a distinct character that has a through line, which is really great because when they all show up at the beginning of the movie, you're like, oh, that's going to be really like too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many actors performing.
Yeah.
They each get something specific to do in the narrative. Richard Grant takes on the doctor role, and then you have Billy Campbell that takes on kind of the wild card American man kind of thing, and then and each one gets something to do in the narrative, and I think that's really fun. Is as the film plays out, you see how each of them falls victim to the danger that they're entering into.
I think it's what we talked about before in The Godfather. Coppola is very much an actor's director. He knows you as an actor, you just don't want to play wall scenery. You want to have something tangible as a character.
Yeah,
and everybody gets the right moments and right time and close-ups and gets the characters out.
Yeah, well, because even going back to like Hammer's version of things, the suitors are kind of mixed with Jonathan, are kind of mixed with Seward, the doctor. Like all of them are kind of mixed into one character in the Hammer films because they just didn't want to have wasted people standing on set not contributing. So it's interesting that Coppola does allow there to be so many of them, but then gives them all something to do. It's not an easy thing to do because most often than not, you want to just eliminate the fat, get rid of the people that don't need to be there,
Trim it away, but he's going to retain that.
Yeah, he retains it and he finds something well to do, and I think he gets three good actors. Richard E. Grant, Cary Elwes, and Billy Campbell are just playing three of the guys that are hanging around on set.
Yeah, some like frat boys show up for the party, and they're you think they're just there just to be a body count.
Yeah,
but Coppola puts some invested. Yeah. So let's talk about costuming because I think that's where it really wins: costuming and set decoration and art direction.
Yeah, the film won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design, Best Makeup, and Best Sound Effects Editing. The costumes were done by Iko Ishioka, who I actually was aware of from the movie The Cell.
You just recently watched The Cell.
Yep. And he also did Mirror, Mirror, which was one of the more flamboyant Snow White adaptations. But yeah, this is a movie that won him the Oscar and very much deserved.
I think
some
he
of the
loves
best costumes.
Drapery, and then in essence of drapery, but guys are dressed well, right?
Yeah.
His robe he looks like Tim's the Kiss, goldish. You see him wear red, of course. Dracula wearing a red robe, and it has the signal of dragon, which is we talked about the Order of Dracula.
Yep.
The Order of Dragon, you want to research that about Vladimir the Impaler, referred to himself as Dracula, which is son of the dragon. His dad considered himself Dracul from the Order of Dragons, and he mentions that as the backstory. He also cites that I don't think it's mentioned in the book, but he also, Coppola embraced that Dracula considers himself ancestor of Attila the Huns, which is sect of a Wakala of Sekules. And, that's here or there, but that's kind of the part of another offshoot of lore instead of him being Vladimir the Imperative Prince of Wallachia.
Yeah, they certainly make make Dracula into a man with prowess. He has a certain danger just to walking into a room, and I think I can't really tell if this was a book reason why they did the Wallachia connection, because of course the famous Castlevania video game series uses Wallachia as well, and that had also been done a few years prior. So I'm wondering how much of that kind of was taken from the time period in which the film was made, or taken directly from the book source material. But that's kind of that melding that Coppola does, where this film feels reminiscent of every single version of this story that's come before, and we've had a lot of them.
And also he embraces the animals, or has power over the animals.
Yes.
And the animals are weary, but also he's a werewolf too.
Yep.
And so yeah.
That's that all boils down to we're analyzing vampires, and Coppola had said that he realized that when you write a vampire character, you don't necessarily have to obey all the rules. You just have to obey the rules you set. And and so he kind of crafted the idea that a vampire is a creature against nature's design, and therefore physics doesn't have to make sense when a vampire is around.
No, because
they are a crime against physics.
I think this is one of the first times he could become mist. Obviously, I think in the book he can become animals. But
I feel like the Spanish language Dracula from 31 had that. But yeah, there's they really embraces the fact that you get to kind of break physical rules. When you're doing it, you just can't break your own rules.
But he also is in charge of the weather, which is there's this. If you read Transylvania Superstitions, there was a disciplined church, our school that you can be recruited, and somehow you can manipulate weather.
Yeah.
And so you see him with the candles. Here comes the wind. wind.
Yeah.
And then he blows into Van Helsing, and Van Helsing realizes who he is by the wind coming. Mm-hmm. But a simple way of just using your wind fans that you have on set as well.
Yeah, but I think especially when you talked about like the werewolf kind of creature effect that he gets, where he gets he basically turns into a giant walking bat. I think that part was excised from Dracula's mythology and vampire mythology because we had creatures like the Wolfman and werewolves, but we forget how closely tied those two creatures were. And you could almost say that the Wolfman was inspired as much by Dracula as Dracula itself.
Yeah, because you're embracing when you talk about like vampires and werewolves, you're not only you're embracing your dark side, but you're embracing your id of animalistic, rather than I shouldn't really go after that woman, but your dark side goes, go after her.
Yep.
Do it.
And we recently talked about North by Northwest, one of the horniest thrillers of all time. This is probably one of the horniest horror films of all time.
Dracula definitely is. Yeah.
A lot of that sensuality to the entire film, and it's not just. I think he embraces it not just with Lucy, who's the one character we all assume is going to be the sensual one, but he embraces it with Winona Ryder's character, with Mina, with the three men that are all interested in Lucy. Harker gets that. Like, he really embraces the fact that, like, Lost Boys said it best: when you're not dead, you find something to enjoy, quite a bit.
You got to find something to do because you're not drinking alcohol anymore. And
Exactly.
Affect you. I remember watching a vampire movie. Why are you guys are just horny all the time? And, well, we can't drink booze.
What else are we supposed to do?
What are we supposed to do? Right.
We don't have,
which is a great. I don't drink wine. I love that.
And that's from the 30s Dracula. And again, that line reappears in one of my favorite Dracula films, Dracula Dead and Loving It, from Mel Brooks, which gets a lot of its comedy from this film having come out just 3 years later.
Yeah. How much blood did they? I think they did use more blood in that movie than this movie.
Maybe. Yeah. But even the scenes. What I think is funny is we forget how funny certain bits of the movie are.
Oh, Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins is one of the most hilarious interpretations of Van Helsing in a serious version of the role. Again, not including Mel Brooks playing it.
He's not afraid to insult you, too. Hey, your bride's not a whore for the devil.
Like,
come on, man. And he's like, we're having a party here. Let's go. Right.
Or like how he doesn't see what he's doing could be misconstrued as very odd when they come in and Lucy is writhing naked on the bed, and like the suitors all come in and they're like, what's wrong with her? And he's like, oh, she's not feeling well. Like, and he doesn't seem to understand that, like, you're a doctor in a room with a naked young woman writhing around on bed, and you don't understand how that could be misperceived. He's kind of just beyond all that,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I would say it embraces what Dracula is first. Mm-hmm. He's an abomination to nature.
Yep.
He's a dark.
The anti-nature.
Yeah. Anti-nature. And aristocrat second. Mm-hmm. Almost you forget that, which is kind of like in the book, where it's the opposite of the old days, where you embrace his aristocrat first, and then he reveals to be a monster. Mm. And I think Coppola takes the reverse. It's a complete monster that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Something that is outside, what is Van Helsing, outside the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
And what a typical evil person says is, look what you did to me, rather than face the responsibility of his actions. Because when he's a bat, look what your God did to me. Mm. And he still has not figured out that you are responsible for the actions. You did this. You renounced this. Instead, you're just angered for you don't take responsibility for your own actions.
Yep.
Especially with the constitute of Lucy. Hey, she was the easy catch. You should have made it so easy for me.
Yeah. Well, we do have to talk about one other thing that the choices we make and how it affects us in this film, and that is the notable casting of Keanu Reeves. Yes. This is the movie that I think most people turn to when they try to make an argument that Keanu Reeves can't act. And Coppola himself said he regretted putting him in the movie because he didn't fit. It's the one thing that seems consistent in all the reviews is that Keanu Reeves is miscast in the movie. And while I can kind of agree to it to an extent, I've never noticed it as much as other people have. How do you feel about
at the time? You noticed it at the time.
Yeah.
But you have to talk about what like Hitchcock talked about, and it's in the book. Harker is the most wooden character of all time, mm-hmm. and the dumbest.
He's very stupid. He's also, though, in the book and in this more proper adaptation, he is the character that we commonly assume as like Renfield, because in the 30s film, Renfield is the one that goes over to get Carfax Abbey taken care of. In this film, in the proper way it's told, it's Harker. Harker gets kind of shafted because they give most of that stupid stuff to Renfield. He's kind of played off as the dumb character, and they make Harker seem smarter than he is, but he is actually very foolish. He is a person who doesn't understand the woman he's marrying. He doesn't understand what's expected of him in that role, and so he does make a lot of mistakes, and he's taken out of the equation.
Intentionally, I think it's written that Jennifer Harker is the counter to Dracula. There's really nothing in depth for both of them. They're pretty much on the surface.
Well, and Dracula is a passionate person.
Even though he's passionate, there's really no...
Harker is not.
You only have a one drive, right? Yeah. So there's really no depth to both of them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the reflection to, Harker. He's just a pencil pusher. Hey, what? You gonna keep me in this bench? Oh, fine. Right.
Yeah. And Harker doesn't seem like he's too concerned about getting out until he realizes that he's going to die in there, which I can't blame him for not wanting to get out.
But I think that's a lot of the criticism. You're not really looking at how I see it. Is he's an empty character just as much as it's a reflection to Dracula, a good guy, but there's really no depth to him.
It comes down to why do the three suitors want Lucy? Exactly why you think. Why do the two men pine over Winona Ryder? Exactly why you'd think. It's less about who they are and what they represent to each of them. So, one last thing I want to point out, because I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. I think this has one of the best and most undervalued scores in cinema history.
I think it's very undervalued.
Yeah. It is from, I'm going to butcher the name, Wojciech Killer, who
Polish?
did The Ninth Gate and The Pianist. I think, he's a Polish
this is
composer.
His first
and
time working on a film with him.
A very, very good and very, very sad score.
It's like a pulse. It continually just a constant, which is Dracula. He's just a constant.
I compared it to the Oceans of Timeline too, because it feels like it ebbs and flows like the tide. It echoes into the film when it needs to, and I think it's a score that I guarantee you when you watch this movie, you will be humming that score for the next 3 days minimum. Yes. And I did too.
It's almost like the Batman score.
And that's the note for me is a great score is one that you don't need the movie to appreciate, that can stand on its own and support the film at the same time. And that's what this one does.
Overall, I think a lot of people were correct when they criticized it. It has a very lush environment on the surface. So it's very full. It has great art direction, everything, but below the surface, there's really nothing there. And I think that's the whole point of the movie. The point of the movie is just almost like Dracula. It's very lushful. It's very enticing, but beneath the surface, there is nothing there. It's empty. It's I don't think it's very palpable. I don't think you have a lot of hope in them all. You don't really care about the characters very much. You just know there's just going to be a lot of carnage, but believe there's nothing there.
See, and I've always viewed this film as it feels like actors on a stage, which is kind of, it works pretty well for me, because then you can have something like Anthony Hopkins with his really over-the-top performance.
Yeah.
And that's maybe one of the reasons I'm not bothered by the Keanu Reeves of it all, is because I feel like he's an actor on a stage. Like that is like they are all playing it up to their nth degree, and I think everyone's kind of playing it that way. And that may come from the fact that the first 2 days of production, they didn't shoot any film. Coppola got all the actors together, and he had them read the book aloud to each other for 2 days. And I think he was aware that he was going to the theatricality of it. Yeah. And that works for me, and that's why I've never been bothered by it.
And I think if you're film lovers, you appreciate the tricky projections of film, the film history that's incorporated.
Appreciate it as a film fan.
Fourth perspective of the stagecoach guy grabbing Keanu Reeves, almost lifting him up because he's on a prop box.
I love that, because it's the stretchy hand Mr. Fantastic thing, where it's like so unrealistic, but it perfectly translates what the book would do.
It's a great metaphor for the movie.
Yep.
There's not a lot of surface, but it's movie magic that we enjoy watching.
Yep.
And it's very lustful. It's almost like, I love the characters. It's almost like they're not on the ground. The horses are, because he slows the camera down and it looks like they're just drifting on the surface.
Yeah.
So a lot of great techniques. I think everybody's right. The techniques, the technical stuff is fantastic. I think the story, it's not really much there to work with, but you put a love story that's interjected.
And it's a movie that's been told to death, too.
And it's been told to death. We know it's going to go from. Yeah.
Yep. And that's kind of the problem that this film had, and definitely the problem that the Kenneth Branagh directed Frankenstein film from '94 also had, was that you've done the story to death in different adaptations, so the one time you actually try to make it as close as you can to the book, people are going to judge it against the adaptations, not against the book.
Yeah. So it's a very difficult read. I never got past 50 pages. So,
Yeah.
right. Have you seen Bram Stoker's Dracula? I recommend it if you like film, you know, all the film history, and costuming is a big part of it. And my God, I want his sunglasses. He's got great sunglasses.
This is a film lover's Dracula, which is funny because it's a book-based Dracula.
That's what I'm trying to get. Yeah, it's a film lover's Dracula. Yeah.
But I do think this is a movie that you may hate it, but you definitely have to watch it first. You have to give it its respect by watching it, and it may turn out to be a film that you absolutely adore, and it may turn out to be one that you absolutely loathe, but you can always appreciate what's being done as well. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and maybe give us down below your favorite adaptation of Dracula. It doesn't have to be the most faithful, but what's your favorite version of the tale put to film? There's 2 versions from the 30s. There's the Hammer one. There's the 79 one. There's Dracula 2000 with Gerard Butler playing Dracula. Maybe you love that one.
If anybody made a list of top 10 most fascinating fictional characters of all time, it has to be a top 10.
Oh, yeah.
Dracula.
He'd have to be in there somewhere because it's probably one of the most adapted books outside of the Bible in history. So so definitely let us know your thoughts in the film below and where you see this in your terms of your Coppola rankings, your Dracula rankings, and everything in between. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Our favorite thing is getting those comments from you guys. It really does mean a lot to us. We appreciate it. And while you're down there in that comment section, do us a favor, click like, and click subscribe. They don't cost you anything to do it, but they help support the channel at the same time and make sure you never miss new episodes. And if you click that little bell icon, you'll actually get notifications when new episodes arrive, so you don't have to go looking for us. We'll be right there for you.
Yep.
And hey, another way that you can be there for us and we'll be there for you, checking out that Patreon that Nick mentioned below. The link's down in the description. And you can donate one of your cups of coffee every month to join the Patreon team. And in doing so, you'll be able to get access to Picks with Kyle and Nick. This month, we're doing our ranking of 1997 movies.
We're getting there.
And we're also going to have exclusive episodes for you. And you can also help us pick what we're going to do in future episodes, which is really important. Because if you really like Francis Ford Coppola, and we haven't covered Youth Without Youth, you can go on there and tell us to watch it. And until next time, you can find my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right.
That's it. I don't have anything catchy.
Well, I mean, you'll never see blood on the shirt at least.